November 15th, 2006. Frostproof, Florida. The name of the town sounds like a promise, doesn't it? A place where the cold can't touch you. But for Abraham Shakespeare, the cold was coming, and it wasn't the weather. It was the kind of chill that settles in your bones when luck, pure, unadulterated, chaotic luck, decides to ruin your life. Let me paint you a picture of Abraham before the madness. He wasn't a man who asked for much. 41 years old, living with his mother in a small, cramped house. He was a big guy, a gentle giant to those who really knew him, but he had the mind of a child in some ways. He couldn't read. Not really. A few words here and there. But the world of letters and contracts was a dark room to him. He navigated life by trust, by instinct. He worked hard, sweating under the Florida sun as a truck driver's assistant, slinging garbage, moving heavy loads, making $8 an hour. He had $5 in his wallet that day. 5 measly dollars to his name. He was riding shotgun in a delivery truck with a coworker, Michael Ford. Just a normal, hot, sticky Wednesday. They pulled into a Town Star convenience store. Just a quick stop for drinks and cigarettes. You know the kind of place. Buzzing fluorescent lights, the smell of old coffee and gasoline. Ford hopped out. Abraham, maybe feeling a sudden itch in his palm, maybe just bored, handed Ford 2 crumpled bills from his wallet. "Give me 2 quick pics," he said. $2. 2 tickets. That moment. Right there. That was the moment the universe handed him a loaded gun and told him it was a bouquet of flowers. Those numbers, 6, 12, 13, 34, 42, and 52, they weren't just numbers. They were a death sentence. The jackpot was $31 million. 31 million. When he realized he won, he didn't run. He didn't hide. He didn't hire a team of lawyers to shield him from the sharks. No, Abraham was the kind of man who wore his heart on his sleeve. He took the lump sum, nearly $17 million in. Cold, hard cash. And almost immediately, the Santa Claus of Lakeland was born. He didn't buy a fleet of yachts. He paid off mortgages for friends. He paid for funerals for strangers. He gave cash to people crying on his doorstep. If you had a sad story, Abraham had a check. He wanted to be loved. He wanted to be the hero. He thought the money was a tool to fix the world's pain. But he forgot that money is like blood in the water. And the water was filling up with sharks faster than he could swim. He was illiterate, remember? He couldn't read the fine print of the people surrounding him. He couldn't see the envy rotting the smiles of the people he called friends. He bought $1 million home in a gated community, but he never felt at home there. He was a simple man in a gilded cage, and the lock was broken. He told his brother, "I'd have been better off broke." He told his mother he wished he could tear the ticket up. But you can't unring a bell. The money was there. The parasites were there. And in the shadows, watching, waiting, was a darkness he never saw coming. A darkness that wore a friendly face. The golden ticket wasn't a ticket to paradise, my dears. It was a ticket to the slaughterhouse. And the butcher was sharpening her knife. Money acts like a magnifying glass. It shows you who people really are. And what Abraham saw, looking through that glass, was ugly. It wasn't just strangers. It was the people standing right next to him. The first cut was the deepest. Michael Ford. Remember the man driving the truck? The man who stopped for sodas? He sued Abraham. He looked this gentle giant in the face and claimed the winning ticket was his, that Abraham had stolen it from his wallet. Imagine that. You share a cab, you work side by side, and for $17 million, your friend tries to brand you a thief. It went to court. A jury listened. They looked at the facts. Abraham's money, Abraham's choice, and they ruled in Abraham's favor. But the victory tasted like ash. It was the first crack in his heart. It taught him that for the right price, loyalty is just a word people say before they stab you in the back. But Ford was just one man. The real horror was the horde. They came from everywhere. People he hadn't spoken to since elementary school suddenly remembered they were best friends. Women who wouldn't look at him twice when he was a garbage collector were suddenly in love with his soul. They lined up outside his house. Literally lined up. Like it was a soup kitchen, but instead of soup, they wanted tens of thousands of dollars. And Abraham, he just gave. He gave until it hurt. He bought houses for people who didn't say thank you. He bought cars that were wrecked a week later. He paid for surgeries that maybe never happened. He kept a stack of cash in his pocket, peeling off bills just to make the begging stop, just to buy a moment of peace. But peace never came. The more he gave, the more they wanted. They were like leeches, latching onto a vein, drinking him dry, their eyes dead and hungry. He started to gain weight. He stopped shaving as much. The stress was eating him alive. He told his mother, "I can't trust nobody." Think about the isolation of that. Surrounded by hundreds of people, all smiling, all shaking your hand, all patting your back, and knowing deep in your gut, that if the money vanished tomorrow, this room would be empty. He was the loneliest man in Florida. He began to rot from the inside out. Not physically, but spiritually. He was drowning in a sea of greed, and he didn't know how to swim. He was illiterate in a world of contracts and loans. People would shove papers in his face, "Sign here, Abraham, it's just for the car," and he would sign his name, not knowing he was signing away pieces of his life. He was a lamb who had wandered into a den of wolves, and the wolves weren't even hiding their teeth anymore. By 2008, a good chunk of the money was gone, vaporized into the pockets of friends and hangers-on. He was tired, so incredibly tired. He wanted someone to save him. He wanted a manager, a protector, someone who could stand at the door and say no when he couldn't. He was desperate for a shield. And that is the most dangerous thing you can be in this world. Desperate. Because the devil can smell desperation. And she was on her way. She heard about the lottery winner who gave away money. She heard about the soft-hearted man who couldn't read. And she smiled. Because she knew exactly how to play him. October 2008. Enter Doris, Dee Dee Moore. If the other leeches were mosquitoes, annoying and hungry, Dee Dee was a python. She didn't just want a bite. She wanted to swallow him whole. She was 37, with a history that read like a warning label. Financial ruin, desperate schemes, a woman always looking for an angle. She was drowning in her own failures, and Abraham was her life raft. But she didn't come to him with her hand out like the others. Oh no, she was smarter than that. She came with a clipboard and a smile. She tracked him down. She hunted him. She pitched him the one thing his ego couldn't resist: immortality. She told him she was an author. She wanted to write a book about his life. From the garbage truck to the mansion, she said. The world needs to know your heart, Abraham. It was the perfect lie. It validated him. It told him he mattered not for his checkbook, but for his soul. For a man who felt used and misunderstood, this was a drug. She offered to clean up the mess his life had become. She told him she knew about business, about assets, about protecting wealth. She looked at the chaotic swarm of moochers around him and said, "I can stop this. I can save you." She moved fast, terrifyingly fast. Within weeks, she wasn't just a writer. She was his shadow. She created an LLC, Alliance Medical Services. Sounds professional, doesn't it? Sounds safe. She told Abraham it was a way to hide his remaining money from the people suing him, from the child support courts, from the beggars. Put the assets here, she whispered, guiding his heavy hand to the signature line. I'll manage it. I'll be the shield. He signed. He always signed. He couldn't read the documents that named her the sole signatory, the one with the power to move every single dime without his permission. She took the nearly $1 million he had left in cash and liquidated it into her control. Then came the isolation. This is the Predator's Handbook, Chapter 1. She told him his mother didn't love him. She told him his friends were laughing at him. She changed his phone number. She became the gatekeeper. If you wanted to talk to Abraham, you had to go through Dee Dee. And Dee Dee always said he was busy or sleeping or didn't want to talk to you. She built a wall around him, brick by brick, and painted a pretty mural on the inside so he wouldn't notice he was in a prison. She bought herself a Hummer, a Corvette, a truck. She paid off her mortgage. She went on vacations. And she told Abraham she was doing it all for him, managing his image. She moved him out of his big house, telling him it was for his safety, to get away from the stress. She moved him into her world. It looked like she was helping him downsize, helping him find peace. But in reality, she was moving the chess piece into the corner. She had the money. She had the control. She had the man. Now, the only thing standing between her and total freedom was the man himself. Because a living lottery winner can change his mind. A living lottery winner can hire a lawyer who can read. But a dead lottery winner? A dead man keeps his secrets. And Dee Dee Moore was ready to write the ending. By early 2009, the cage wasn't just locked. The key had been melted down. This wasn't a partnership anymore. It was a hostage situation. Only the hostage didn't realize he couldn't leave until he tried the door. Dee Dee Moore had successfully transferred every significant asset Abraham owned into her control. And she did it with a smile, with that terrifyingly patient voice of a teacher guiding a slow student. We have to protect it, Abraham, she'd say, sliding another document across the table. If it's in my name, the child support people can't touch it. The lawyers can't touch it. I'm doing this for you. And Abraham, terrified of losing what little he had left, signed. He signed over the remaining cash. He signed over the rights to the loans people owed him. But the masterstroke was the house, his $1 million sanctuary in the gated community. She convinced him to sign the deed over to her company, Alliance Medical Services. On paper, she bought it. In reality, she paid pennies, and even those pennies were likely his own money moving in a circle. Suddenly, Abraham was a guest in his own home. He was a tenant, and she was the landlord from hell. The power dynamic flipped so violently it would give you whiplash. Abraham went from being the man with the golden touch to a man on an allowance. He had to ask her for $20 to buy lunch. He had to beg her for gas money. Imagine the humiliation. A man who had $30 million attached to his name, standing there, head down, asking a woman who was supposed to be his employee if he could have enough cash to buy a pack of cigarettes. And she would say no. She would lecture him on budgeting. She would tell him he was irresponsible. She stripped him of his dignity before she stripped him of his life. She needed to sever the last lifeline. His mother, Elizabeth Walker. Abraham loved his mother. She was his rock. But Dee Dee knew that a mother's intuition is a dangerous thing. A mother sees through the fake smiles. So, Dee Dee began the whisper campaign. She doesn't love you, Abraham. She just wants the check. She's using you like the rest of them. It was insidious. Day after day, Drip by drip, she poisoned his mind against his own flesh and blood. She convinced him that he was alone in the world, that she was the only one who truly cared. He stopped visiting Elizabeth. He stopped calling. He retreated into the fortress Dee Dee had built, not knowing it was a tomb. But the human spirit is resilient, and Abraham wasn't stupid. He was uneducated, yes, but he had street smarts. He started to sense the trap. He started to realize that the protection felt a lot like theft. The arguments began. The walls of the house heard them shouting. He demanded access to his accounts. He wanted to know where the money was. And Dee Dee? She didn't panic. She got colder. She started recording him. Think about that. She carried a recorder, taping their conversations, baiting him, trying to get him to sound unstable or aggressive. She was building a defense file for a murder she hadn't even committed yet. The tension in that house was thick enough to choke on. Abraham told a friend, "That woman is going to be the death of me." It wasn't a figure of speech. It was a prophecy. He knew he was in danger. He knew he had made a fatal mistake. But he was paralyzed. If he left broke. He had no car. She controlled them. He had no cash. She had it all. He was trapped in a web of legal documents he couldn't read and a relationship he couldn't escape. She began to set the stage for the finale. She started telling people, neighbors, his few remaining friends, that Abraham was sick of it all. "He's going to leave," she'd say casually. "He talks about just disappearing, moving to an island, getting away from all you leeches." She was planting the narrative. She was writing the script of his exit so that when he vanished, nobody would be surprised. They would just nod and say, "Yeah, he said he wanted to go." It was the hostile takeover of a human life. She had taken his money. She had taken his house. She had taken his family. Now, there was nothing left to take but his breath. April 6th, 2009. A Monday. Mondays are usually for fresh starts, for getting back to the grind. But for Abraham Shakespeare, this Monday was the end of the line. The sun rose over central Florida just like it always did, burning off the morning mist, unaware that it was shining on a dead man walking. It was the last time anyone outside of Dee Dee Moore's dark circle saw him alive. He didn't pack a bag. He didn't say goodbye to his mother. He didn't hug his two sons. Think about that. A man who supposedly wanted to flee the country, to start a new life in Jamaica or Puerto Rico, leaves without a single suitcase, without a passport, without kissing his children. It defies logic. But in the moment, nobody saw the cliff edge. They just saw Abraham, stressed, tired, perhaps a little more beaten down than usual, getting into a car. The details of those final hours are murky, shrouded in the lies Dee Dee would later spin. But we know he was with her. She was the last face he saw. She was the last voice he heard. Maybe she promised him a resolution. "Let's go sort this out, Abraham. Let's go get your money." Maybe he got into that car thinking he was finally going to get his life back. Instead, he was being driven to his grave. He vanished. It wasn't a fade. It was a hard cut to black. One minute he was a presence, a big, loud, laughing, breathing man. And the next, he was just gone. His phone, usually buzzing with calls from people wanting money, went silent. His usual haunts were empty. The silence that followed was heavy, unnatural. But here is the brilliance of Dee Dee's evil. She had already dug the hole in people's minds before she dug the hole in the ground. Because she had spent months telling everyone how miserable he was, how much he wanted to escape, nobody panicked immediately. When days turned into weeks, people just shrugged. He finally did it, they thought. He finally ran away from the stress. It was exactly what she wanted them to think. She used his own pain as her camouflage. In reality, something horrific had happened. Whether it was a gunshot in the dark, a struggle in a lonely room, or a cold, calculated execution, the light of Abraham Shakespeare was snuffed out. The body that had once carried $30 million worth of luck was now just dead weight. It had to be moved. It had to be hidden. And while the world continued to spin, while his mother sat on her porch wondering why her son hadn't called, while his friends argued over where he might have gone, Abraham was already underground. The transition was complete. He was no longer a man. He was a secret buried deep, while the woman who put him there walked around in the sunshine, wearing his smile, spending his money, and playing the part of the concerned friend. The vanishing was so clean, so absolute. It was as if he had never existed at all. Except for the money. The money was still there, and now it was all hers. The dead don't text. They don't write letters. They don't send birthday wishes. But in the weeks following April 2009, Abraham Shakespeare, or rather, the digital ghost wearing his name, became surprisingly chatty. This was the second phase of Dee Dee Moore's plan, and it was perhaps even more chilling than the murder itself. It was the puppeteering of a corpse. Abraham was illiterate. I cannot stress this enough. His texts, when he sent them, were painful, fragmented things. Call me. Okay. Yes. He struggled to spell simple words. But suddenly, his friends and family started receiving long, eloquent messages from his number. I am fine. I just need time away from everyone. Please stop bothering Dee Dee. She is the only one helping me. The sentences had punctuation. They had complex grammar. They sounded like a woman trying to sound like a man, but failing to hide her own voice. Friends would look at their phones, confused. Abraham didn't write this, they'd say. Abraham doesn't know how to spell sincerely. But the messages kept coming. It was a macabre pantomime. Dee Dee was sitting there, likely with his phone in one hand and hers in the other, having conversations with herself. She would text her own phone from his. Dee Dee, thank you for everything. You are an angel. Then she would show these texts to people as proof. See? He's fine. He loves me. He's just sick of you all. But she didn't stop at texts. She grew bolder. She sent a letter to his mother, Elizabeth. A handwritten letter. Imagine the cruelty of that. A mother holding a piece of paper, desperate for word from her missing son, and realizing instantly that it was a forgery. My son can't write, Elizabeth said, her heart breaking all over again. The letter claimed he was happy, that he was safe. It was signed with a signature that looked nothing like the shaky scrawl Abraham used. It was a slap in the face. It was Dee Dee mocking them, thinking they were too stupid to notice the difference between a man who could barely read a menu and a man writing a memoir. Then came the location lies. She told people he was in the Caribbean. Maybe Jamaica, maybe Puerto Rico. She said he was getting medical treatment for an illness he didn't have. He's sick, she'd whisper, feigning concern. He doesn't want anyone to see him like this. It was the perfect cover for why he couldn't video chat, why he couldn't meet. He was healing. But the most desperate, stomach-turning act was the phone call. Elizabeth Walker's birthday came around. Dee Dee knew that if Abraham missed his mother's birthday, the police would be called immediately. He would never miss it. So, she hired a stranger. She found a man, paid him a few bucks, and told him to call Elizabeth and pretend to be Abraham. The phone rang. Elizabeth picked up, hope surging in her chest. Hello. Happy birthday, Mama, a voice said. Elizabeth froze. A mother knows her child's voice. She knows the timbre, the breath, the soul of it. The voice on the line was thin. It was wrong. "Who is this?" she demanded. "This ain't my son." The line went dead. Or maybe the stranger tried to stumble through the script Dee Dee gave him. It didn't matter. The damage was done. Elizabeth hung up the phone, and she knew. She knew in her gut that her boy wasn't in Jamaica. He wasn't in Puerto Rico. He was gone. And the woman driving his Corvette, living in his house, and holding his phone knew exactly where he was. Dee Dee was building a house of cards on a foundation of lies, and she was running out of glue. The digital ghost was starting to flicker. The contradictions were piling up. You can only pretend a man is alive for so long before the silence of his physical absence becomes deafening. She thought she was being clever, using technology to keep him alive. But every text she sent, every fake letter she wrote, was just another nail in her own coffin. She was leaving a trail of evidence that screamed of a cover-up. The ghost was haunting her now. November 2009. 7 months. 7 long, agonizing months since anyone had seen Abraham's face. The lie had stretched as thin as it could go before snapping. The texts were not enough. The fake letters were not enough. The silence from the man himself was a roaring void that swallowed every excuse Dee Dee Moore could invent. Elizabeth Walker walked into the police station. It takes a lot for a mother to admit her child is truly missing, to speak the words that make the nightmare official. But she did it. She filed the report. And with that single act, the clock started ticking for Dee Dee Moore. The Polk County Sheriff's Office didn't just see a missing person case. They saw a $30 million lottery winner who had vanished off the face of the earth, leaving behind a woman who seemed to have inherited his entire life. Detectives started knocking. At first, Dee Dee played the cool, collected business partner. She welcomed them. She smiled. She spun her tale with the confidence of a sociopath. "Oh, Abraham. He's fine. He's just hiding. You know how people are with the money. He just wants to be left alone." She dropped names of cities: Orlando, San Antonio, Miami. She painted him as a fugitive from his own fame, running from child support payments and greedy friends. But cops are professional lie detectors, and Dee Dee was throwing up red flags like she was landing a plane. The details didn't sit right. Why did she have his phone? "He gave it to me so he wouldn't be tracked," she said. Why did she have the keys to his house? "I'm watching it for him." Why was she driving his car? "He wanted me to have it." Every answer was convenient. Too convenient. Then, the story started to change. This is where the web gets sticky. When police pressed her on specific dates, her timeline wobbled. First, she saw him last week. Then, it was last month. Then, she claimed he had come back in secret to pick up cash. She was improvising, dancing on the edge of a cliff. She even told investigators that she was the victim, that people were harassing her because they were jealous of her relationship with Abraham. She tried to make herself the martyr. The media got wind of it. "Where is Abraham Shakespeare?" The headlines splashed across Florida. Now, the pressure wasn't just in an interrogation room. It was everywhere. Dee Dee loved the spotlight, and that was her mistake. She gave interviews. She talked to reporters. She cried on camera, squeezing out dry tears, pleading for Abraham to come home. It was a performance, and a bad one. She looked into the lens and lied to millions of people. But in doing so, she locked herself into a narrative she couldn't escape. The police started digging into the financials. They saw the transfers. They saw the theft. They saw a woman who had systematically stripped a man of everything he owned before he disappeared. That's not what a business manager does. That's what a butcher does before the slaughter. They knew he was dead. They didn't have a body. They didn't have a murder weapon, and they didn't have a confession. But they knew. They looked at this woman, buzzing around in her stolen Corvette, and they saw a killer hiding in plain sight. The game of cat and mouse had begun, but Dee Dee didn't realize that the cat wasn't just one detective. It was the entire force of the law, and they were closing in. By December 2009, the investigation had stalled. The police knew she did it. The family knew she did it. The whole town knew she did it. But knowing and proving are two different things in the eyes of the law. Without a body, Dee Dee Moore was just a person of interest with a really bad reputation. They needed a crack in the armor. They needed a Trojan horse. Enter Greg Smith. Greg was an old friend of Abraham's, a man who had known him long before the millions. But more importantly, he was someone Dee Dee thought she could manipulate. She saw him as another pawn, another hungry mouth she could feed with lies and promises. She reached out to him, perhaps sensing the walls closing in, perhaps just needing to brag or vent. But Greg Smith had a secret. Underneath his shirt, taped to his chest, was a wire. He was working with the Polk County Sheriff's Office. He was the bait. The dance began. Greg played the role of the loyal soldier perfectly. He told Dee Dee he was on her side. "They're trying to frame you, Dee Dee," he'd say, leaning in, his voice low. "We gotta fix this. We gotta protect you." And Dee Dee, starving for an ally, drank it up. She let her guard down. The mask of the grieving business partner slipped, and the face of the panicked killer started to show. She didn't confess outright, not at first. She was too cunning for that. Instead, she started talking about hypotheticals. She started talking about how to make the problem go away. And then, she dropped the bombshell that would seal her fate. She asked Greg if he knew anyone who would take the fall. "I need someone to say they did it," she whispered. "I'll pay them. $50,000. Maybe more. Just find me someone who's already going to prison for life, someone who has nothing to lose. They just need to say they killed Abraham." Think about the insanity of that request. If Abraham was alive in Jamaica, sipping rum on a beach as she claimed, why did she need a fall guy for his murder? It was a confession wrapped in a business transaction. The police, listening in a van parked a safe distance away, must have felt a jolt of electricity. She had just admitted there was a murder to confess to. But she didn't stop there. The conversations grew more frantic. She gave Greg the gun, a .38 caliber revolver, and asked him to dispose of it. She was handing them the murder weapon. She was cleaning house, handing the broom to the police. Then came the drive, the most chilling drive of Greg Smith's life. She took him to a property she owned on Highway 60 in Plant City. It was a sprawling, rural lot, quiet and isolated. She wanted to show him something. They walked through the grass, the wire recording every crunch of their footsteps, every breath of wind. She pointed to a specific spot in the backyard, a newly poured concrete slab. It looked out of place. It looked deliberate. "You see that?" she said, or words to that effect. She warned him about it. She was territorial about that slab. She indicated that digging there would be a very, very bad idea. She was practically drawing an X on the treasure map. She thought she was showing her trusted fixer where the bodies were buried, so he could help her keep them hidden. In reality, she was giving the coordinates of her own destruction. Greg kept his cool. He nodded. He agreed. He played the part until he could get back to his car, back to safety. His heart must have been hammering against his ribs. He had looked into the eyes of a woman who had killed his friend, and he had smiled at her. He had walked over the grave of Abraham Shakespeare. The Wire had caught it all. The solicitation of a false confession, the disposal of the weapon, the location of the body. Dee Dee Moore thought she was buying insurance. She had just sold herself. Down the river, January 2010. The game was over. The Wire had done its job. Greg Smith had walked into the lion's den and come out with the map. The police didn't need to guess anymore. They didn't need to politely ask Dee Dee where Abraham was. They knew. They had the coordinates of the nightmare. The convoy rolled out to the property on Highway 60 in Plant City. It wasn't a raid. It was an excavation. They brought shovels. They brought heavy machinery. They brought the cadaver dogs, animals trained to smell the scent of death that humans try so hard to wash away. The property was quiet, that eerie, rural silence where the wind rustles through the trees and birds sing, completely indifferent to the horror beneath the grass. Dee Dee Moore wasn't there to stop them this time. The legal walls had closed in. The property, the one she had bought with Abraham's money, the one she had tried to hide him in, was now a crime scene. The officers moved with grim purpose. They went straight to the backyard, straight to the spot Greg Smith had walked over. There it was, the concrete slab. It was crude, out of place, a scar on the earth. It looked like someone had poured it in a hurry, a desperate attempt to seal a secret forever. But concrete doesn't keep secrets. It just buys time. And time had run out. The jackhammer started. Rat-a-tat-tat-tat. The sound tore through the quiet morning, a mechanical heartbeat pounding against the ground. Dust flew up, choking the air. They chipped away at the stone, breaking the seal Dee Dee had placed over the truth. It wasn't just construction work. It was an exorcism. They were tearing down the lies to get to the reality. They cleared the rubble. Then the shovels went into the dirt. Foot by foot. 1 foot down. 2 feet down. The earth was heavy, packed tight. 3 feet. 4 feet. The suspense was a physical weight on everyone standing there. The dogs were going crazy. They knew. They signaled that something was there, something that didn't belong in the cold, dark ground. At 5 feet deep, the shovels hit something that wasn't dirt. It wasn't a coffin. There was no dignity here. No suit, no satin pillow. It was a man, discarded like trash. Abraham Shakespeare. The man who had won $30 million. The man who had given away fortunes to strangers. The man who just wanted to be loved. He was rotting in the dirt, buried under a slab of concrete in a backyard that wasn't his. The medical examiners moved in. It was a grim tableau. They confirmed it quickly. The fingerprints matched. The dental records matched. But they didn't need records to see the tragedy. He had been shot twice in the chest. 2 bullets. That was the price of his generosity. That was the receipt for his lottery ticket. News broke instantly. Abraham Shakespeare found. The headline rippled across the country, turning the mystery into a tragedy. The hope that maybe, just maybe, he was sitting on a beach in Jamaica evaporated. The reality was stark and brutal. He had been there the whole time. While Dee Dee was giving interviews, while she was sending fake texts, while she was driving his Corvette, he was decomposing 5 feet beneath her property. The police didn't wait. They went for Dee Dee. She was arrested, her web of lies finally torn to shreds by the truth of the body. She looked stunned, perhaps unable to believe that her perfect plan had unraveled. She had thought she was smarter than everyone. She thought the money made her invincible. But standing there in handcuffs, with the dirt of the grave virtually on her hands, she was just another killer who got caught. The concrete tomb was empty now, but a prison cell was waiting to fill the void. Tampa, Florida, December 2012. The courtroom was packed. The air was thick with the kind of tension that only comes when a monster is finally put in a cage, and the public gathers to see if the lock will hold. Dee Dee Moore walked in. She wasn't wearing the expensive clothes she had bought with Abraham's money anymore. She was in custody, but her eyes were still defiant. She didn't look like a woman crushed by guilt. She looked like a woman annoyed that her script had been rewritten by someone else. The trial was a spectacle. It was the final act of the circus she had started 3 years earlier. But this time, she wasn't the ringmaster. She was the exhibit. The prosecution didn't just present a case. They painted a portrait of pure, distilled evil. They laid it out, brick by brick. The financial records showing the systematic draining of his accounts. The cell phone tower pings that put her at the murder scene. The text messages she sent from his phone when he was already dead. And the devastating tapes from Greg Smith, where she casually negotiated the price of a fall guy. Dee Dee's defense was a masterclass in delusion. She didn't just deny it. She invented a whole new reality. She blamed drug dealers. She blamed a lawyer. She blamed masked intruders who supposedly broke in, killed Abraham, and forced her to clean it up. She tried to spin a tale where she was the victim, terrified and coerced. At one point, she even claimed that Abraham wasn't dead, or that if he was, she had tried to save him. It was frantic. It was desperate. It was the thrashing of a shark caught in a net, biting at everything in reach. But the jury wasn't buying tickets to her show. They saw the cold, hard facts. They saw a woman who had befriended a vulnerable, illiterate man solely to harvest him. They saw the concrete slab. They saw the gun. After hearing weeks of testimony that peeled back the layers of her manipulation, they didn't need long to decide. When the verdict was read, guilty of first-degree murder, the room didn't gasp. It exhaled. It was the sound of truth finally landing. She was convicted of murder with a firearm. She was dead to rights. Judge Emmett Battles looked at her from the bench. Judges see a lot of bad people. They see thieves, killers, liars. But Dee Dee Moore was something else. He called her the most manipulative person he had ever seen. He saw the coldness in her soul, the absolute lack of remorse. He sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus another 25 years for using a gun. She wasn't going to a tropical island. She wasn't going to a mansion. She was going to a concrete box, not unlike the one she had built for Abraham. But hers would have bars, and she would be alive to feel the walls closing in every single day until she took her last breath. As they led her away, the story of Abraham Shakespeare came to its tragic close. It is a story that people call the lottery curse, but that's a lazy title. It wasn't the lottery that killed him. It wasn't the money. It was a predator. Abraham was a man who won the world but lost his life because he refused to stop being kind. He wanted to share. He wanted to trust. In a better world, those would be virtues. In the world Dee Dee Moore lived in, they were weaknesses to be exploited. He lies now in a proper grave, surrounded by the family that loved him, the family Dee Dee tried to steal him from. And she sits in a cell, a millionaire of nothing, queen of an empire of dirt. The money is gone. The fame is a stain. And the gentle giant from Florida, the man who just wanted to buy a round of sodas for his friends, is finally at peace, far away from the wolves.